Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bernardo Rodriguez. I'm an attorney at the Legal Aid Justice Center. So, moving right along, how do you apply? What's the application process? There are three forms: the I-821D, I-765, and I-765WS. Those are available on the USCIS website, www.uscis.gov. And on those forms, you're going to have to put biographic information, and you're going to have to include supporting documents, which we're going to talk about right now. Along with the application, you would have to submit a fee of $465. That includes the fee for the work permit and fingerprinting. To pay the fee, you would submit a money order to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. There are no fee waivers, unfortunately. There are fee exceptions in very limited circumstances. However, they're pretty extreme, such as being homeless or disabled. So most people are going to have to pay those $465. Everyone is required to have a background investigation. And because of that, it's very important to be 100% honest on your application about arrests, citations, run-ins with law enforcement, immigration history. It's just not only just generally good to tell the truth, but especially for these purposes, you need to be 100% honest, because if you're caught lying, it could be a really big problem. And just don't rely on the background investigation to tell them everything. It's up to you to give the information. It's up to you to give a 100% accurate picture of yourself. So, some other considerations in the process: there won't be an interview except in unusual circumstances. Make sure your application is complete, because you might get what's called an RFE, a request for evidence, which will almost certainly delay the application process. And the most important thing here is there's no right to appeal. You get one shot at this. So make sure you take advantage of it, you do it right. That's why we tell folks, if they can afford it, to go see a lawyer or to go to one of these workshops that many of our partner organizations are doing. Please avoid notarios, people who are not licensed to practice law and who do not have experience or have not been trained in immigration law. So what are the documents that you're going to need? Because that's the most important thing here in many ways. Because that's how you're going to prove that you qualify, that you're going to prove all the elements that the policy requires for granting the deferred action. So to start off, documents that prove age. So folks that have not yet turned 31 as of June 15th, 2012. Birth certificates, that's probably the most obvious one. If they're in a different language, they have to be translated. Also, you can use passports or another government-issued ID, cédulas, other national IDs, matricula, DUIs, anything that your home country issued to you that's an official government document that has your information on it would be helpful. This is also an important document to have, because you need to have identification when you go in and do your fingerprints. If you don't have one of these documents, these government-issued documents, or if they are expired, renew them or obtain them now. Many countries take several months to get these to you. There's no point in waiting. It could actually hurt you. Just get started now, because it could take some time. Next, documents that will show entry to the U.S. before your 16th birthday. And you're going to see that a lot of the same documents will prove different elements. You're going to hear a lot of repetition for the types of documents that you need. So, proof that if you entered lawfully in the United States, you can show with a passport stamp or I-94 card. It's a card that they give you, immigration gives you when you enter. It tells you how long you can stay, or some other proof of entry immigration document that you were given. If you entered without documents, that is, without permission, you can use school enrollment records, transcripts, report cards, medical records or vaccination records that are required for school, your parents' tax returns if you're listed as a dependent, or if you're listed as a resident, you could include your lease. So documents that prove continuous residence for at least 5 years prior to June 15, 2012. And you're going to see June 15, 2012, the day that this was announced, is a very important date in terms of the requirements and elements for deferred action. Again, school records, medical records, financial documents, tax returns, bank account statements, leases, mortgages, property tax records, pay stubs or other employment records, bills such as your cell phone bill, your car insurance, anything that has your name on it. And the more official it is, the more it's based on a necessity like a utility, the better it's going to be. Or any U.S. document with your name and date on it. And, you know, obviously if you have some of the other ones that are specifically named, that's better. But the more documentation you have, the more you can support each element, the better off you're going to be. So more on physical presence. You want to make sure you cover every quarter of every year for the last 5 years at least. So again, submit as much as you can. Submit as much as available, but you definitely want to try and connect keep the dots, like the chronological dots together, and connect them as much as possible. But each quarter, so every 3 months, you want to have a document that shows something would be very helpful. Very important to note that affidavits generally will not be accepted to prove an element or requirement. They can be used to fill in the gaps, but you definitely want documentation for each element, and if you need to sort of fill in some of the space with affidavits, that is sworn statements or letters from family, friends, employers, whatnot, you can do that, but do not rely on affidavits to prove each element. And if you've traveled outside of the United States in the last 5 years, please consult an attorney before applying. We know that attorneys can be expensive, but you know, this is a very important thing. This is this is something that affects people's lives, and if it's possible to consult an attorney, please do so. So, moving on to documents that prove physical presence on June 15, 2012, and that you have no lawful immigration status. Again, as before, phone bills, pay stubs, bank statements covering the date June 15, 2012. And if you don't have that exact date, if you have something near it, June 14th, June 16th, that's good too. Obviously, if you can get June 15th is the best, but try and get around it if you can. And to show proof of lawful status that it had expired before that date, again, immigration documents we've talked about before, I-94, I-20, passport or a visa. So here's the big one of the big requirements, showing that you were currently in school, have graduated from high school, obtained a GED, or have been honorably discharged from the armed services or the Coast Guard. For this, we've spoken about it before, school enrollment records, report cards or transcripts. If anybody has dropped out and you're under 21, it's not too late to try and re-enroll in school. You can use your high school diploma or an official transcript, the GED or any documentation that shows you have a GED. Again, if you don't have a GED and you're past 21, you can enroll in a program. It's not too late for that. And for the armed services, discharge papers that show that you were honorably discharged from either the armed forces or the Coast Guard. So, more on currently in school. Being currently in school includes public or private elementary school, middle school, junior high, high school, or secondary school. Or it can include an education, literacy, or career training program that leads to placement in post-secondary education or job training or employment. Or it includes education programs that assist students in either obtaining a high school diploma or a GED. Again, it's not too late if you don't have a high school diploma and you're under 21, or if you're over 21, it's not too late to enroll in a GED program. So how do you obtain school records? Most schools districts are required to keep most of folks' records. So as long as you can locate your school records office, that shouldn't be a problem. It's actually not that hard. Most people are here internet savvy. You can just look online. go in person and request it. If you get any school documents, we advise strongly that you get them certified by the registrar or anybody else that's authorized to register to certify documents. I know we're in Arlington right now, but Fairfax County Public Schools, the process is if you're currently attending, you just go to your current school and ask them for the records. If you've been there within the last 5 years, talk to your current school. If it's been more than 5 years, then you have to go to a central records office. The address is right here, SCPS Records Center, 3701 Franconia Road, Alexandria, Virginia, 22310. So immigration records. You want to start finding, you want to use records of all your previous applications to immigration, any lawful entries to the United States, or any other immigration-related records, anything that comes from the U.S. federal government, or even your embassy if it's related to immigration. You want to gather any paper, absolutely any paper that you sent, or copy that you have that you sent to immigration, or that you received from immigration, and send it in. Remember, more is better for this. Documentation is what you need to show that you meet these elements. And also ask your parents or legal guardians or anybody else that was in charge of you if they applied for you, if they have any immigration applications, whether pending or have had immigration applications, if you've been put on as a derivative or a dependent, or beneficiary. These are all very important questions to ask your family members. It's very important information you need to have a complete application and understand what is going on with with the process for you specifically. So tips on collecting documents. For all documents gathered, make at least one copy. That's like at least, I would say, make 2 copies. And that way you're prepared if you're going to go meet with an attorney or go to one of the workshops from our partners. You want to be ready to go. You don't want to wait on this. You don't want to miss an opportunity if there's a workshop. So get all these documents together, make copies of them. And if you're doing this yourself, make sure you keep a complete copy of everything you sent. And I would advise that you just take a stack of documents and put it in a copier, and that way you know you got everything, even if you already have other copies of it. And then just staple it, and you know what your application looked like when you sent it in. And make sure you send it certified or overnight U.S. mail. So other information you want to gather. Any previous addresses you've had since you've arrived in the United States. I know that's hard. I have trouble doing it myself, but it's very important that you start now. Information on how, when, and where you first arrived. And again, documentation is key. Get any documentation you have for that. Your current, or the applicant's current income, expenses, and assets. This is going to be very important for the employment authorization form. And don't forget, there's a requirement for 2 passport-style photos. There's a $465 money order to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And again, documentation, that's everything. Make sure that you start gathering it now, and you can't overdo it. Just don't do too little. I'm going to turn it over to Simon Sandoval Motionberg right now to finish up for us.